Shalom, my friends. Today I'm going to share with you on a very controversial subject. I've entitled it Clean and Unclean Food in the New Testament. Now, for the text, let me quote from you from the well known Acts of the Apostles, chapter 10, verses 9 to 28. Acts chapter 10, verse 9. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the sixth hour. They became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and a certain vessel descending upon him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts and creeping things and fowls of the air. There came a voice to him, Arise, Peter, kill and eat. Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake to him until again the second time, What God has cleansed, thou shalt not call common. This was done 3 times. The vessel was received up again into heaven. While Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the man which was sent from Cornelius that made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate and called and asked whether Simon, who was surnamed Peter, was lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, get thee down, go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause therefore, wherefore you are come? And they said, Cornelius, the centurion, a just man, the one that fears God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned by God by an holy angel to send for thee to his house and to hear words of thee. Then called he them in and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, Cornelius waited for them, had called together his kinsmen and near friends. As Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. And he said unto them, You know how it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one of another nation. But God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So Peter's vision, the first question is, was it a command from the Lord to kill and eat unclean animals? Now, this is the position taken by most churches and most Christians in the world. But you look at what Peter said when he was given the command. He said he had never eaten anything defiled or unclean. The word defiled is the same as the word common or unclean. Note that this was sometime already after Pentecost, well after Yashua's ascension into heaven. Peter, apostle of Yashua, was still observing Leviticus 11, where the law of clean and unclean foods is written. And Peter, when he went to Cornelius' household, interpreted his vision to mean that now it had become lawful for a Jew to keep company with Gentiles. He never went out and ate unclean food after the vision. So, in other words, Peter interpreted his vision not as license, freedom to eat any bird, animal, fish that he wanted, clean or unclean, but that the vision was meant to show him that the door to the Gentiles was now open for salvation. Now, there are two key Greek words that are in view here that we would do well to bear in mind, because there's a lot of mistranslation in different versions of the Bible. The first Greek word is the word koinos, G2839. And this is the word that should be translated as common or defiled, but sometimes is translated as unclean as well, or simply unclean. But it should be common or defiled, because the word that should be translated as unclean is the Greek word akathatos, G169. Okay, G169 akathatos means impure, morally lewd, or specifically demonic, foul, unclean. And in my interest, my hearers and my viewers to know that in the Septuagint, the Bible version of the Old Testament that was translated into Greek about 200 years before Christ, before Yashua was born, the Greek word for unclean is akathatos, okay, in the Septuagint version, okay, not koinos, it's akathatos. Right, and let's look at what Yashua's encounter with the Pharisees in Mark chapter 7, which is another passage that has been misconstrued by most Christians and teachers of the Bible to mean that we now have license to eat all kinds of food, clean or unclean. So let's examine Mark chapter 7 carefully, reading from verses 14 to 23. When he had called all the people unto him, he said unto them, Hearken unto me, every one of you, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entering to him that can defile him. But the things that come out of him, these are they that defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And when he was entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable, and he said unto them, Are you so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without enters into a man, it cannot defile him, because it enters not into his heart, but into his belly, but goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. Then it says, That which come out of a man, that defiles the man, for from within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. Please note, this is the passage used by Christians to justify eating unclean food. They claim Yeshua said that nothing a man eats can defile him. Now, some translations also insert the clause, Yashua making all foods clean in verse 19. But in the original versions of the Bible, this was not there. Now, this is wrong because the context of Yeshua's discussion with the Pharisees was not about clean, unclean food, but the washing of hands. Look at verse 3 of Mark chapter 3. Because the Pharisees observed that the disciples of Yeshua did not wash their hands before partaking of their food. And you know, the Pharisees had very strict rules about hand washing and proper washing of pots and pans and so on before they partake of their food. So this has nothing to do with clean versus unclean food. This is having to do with eating food with unclean hands, with dirty hands, with defiled hands, full of bacteria, if you like. Okay? So the Pharisees were aghast at the behavior of Yeshua's disciples. So Yeshua was telling them, you're so worried about defilement from unclean hands, but you're not worried about the defilement that comes from the heart of a man. Because at most you can defile yourself with the bacteria. Yeshua didn't say it, okay? But whatever dirt you get into your system, it gets flushed out eventually. Of course, the unsaid point was that some people can get sick uh, if the bacteria can cause food poisoning, but that's not what is in view here. The Pharisees were firmly of the view that if one were to eat with unwashed hands, this would cause the person to be like spiritually defiled, contaminated, unfit for God's presence. But this is not what the law of a clean and unclean food in Leviticus 11 said. That was said in the context of people partaking of unclean food, unclean birds, unclean animals, and unclean fishes, especially and also including the insects and so on. Okay, so let me repeat. This passage in Mark chapter 7 has nothing to do with clean versus unclean food in the Leviticus 11 sense of the word, but it has to do with eating with unwashed hands. Okay, so let's see what else. Now you can verify this further in Matthew chapter 15, where a parallel account of this encounter of Yeshua with the Pharisees occurred. And I quote for you Matthew chapter 15, verses 17 to 20. Do not you understand that whatsoever enters in at the mouth goes into the belly, casts out into the draught? But those things that proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts and murders and adulteries and fornications and thefts, false witness and blasphemies. These are the things that defile a man. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. So here Yeshua is concentrating on spiritual defilement. Okay? And eating with unclean hands does not defile a man. But he didn't say that eating unclean foods would not defile a man, because that's not what Leviticus 11 says. Because Leviticus 11 is very clear that unclean food, animals listed there, are an abomination to Yahweh, to our Heavenly Father. Whoever touches, whoever eats these unclean things become an abomination to Father Yahweh. So it's not just defiling in a sense of being dirty, but you become detestable to him. Unclean foods are detestable to Yahweh. They are an abomination to Father Yahweh. Okay, but eating with unwashed hands does not cause the same abomination. Okay, and Yeshua pointed out to what comes from the evil of our hearts, the sins that we commit. These are the things that make us abomination. So the law of clean and unclean in Leviticus 11 is a commandment of Yahweh. Anyone who breaks the commandment becomes detestable to him, is defiled to him. Okay, so let me repeat. In Matthew 15:20, Yeshua was talking about eating with unwashed hands, not capable of spiritually defiling a man. If Yeshua had declared all foods clean, he and his disciples would have been accused by the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees, many times over. Likewise, you notice that in the epistles, Acts of the Apostles, none of the disciples of Christ, Peter, Paul, or anybody else, were ever charged by the rabbis, by the Jews, the Judeans, of ever eating unclean food. That was never in view at all. In all their teachings, they never contradicted Leviticus chapter 11, the list of clean and unclean foods. So let me repeat. Let me repeat. The disciples of Yeshua, Yeshua himself, observed, obeyed Leviticus 11 all the way, all their lives, and they never changed Leviticus 11. And why not, you may ask me? Simple. Yahweh never changes. He declares this in the book of Malachi. In the book of Hebrews, we are told Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The God that caused the Bible to be written from the first page of Genesis to the last page of Revelation is the same God. He does not change his mind from one generation to another. He does not contradict what it says in the Old Testament by something else in the New Testament. He never does this. And please note something else. The Greek word for defile used by Yeshua in the passage in Mark and Matthew that we talked about just now is the Greek word koinos and not akathatos. Koinos can be translated as common or defile, okay? But akathatos refers to what is unclean in terms of Leviticus chapter 11, declared unclean by Yahweh. Akathatos. Demons, evil spirits are described as akathatos throughout the New Testament, not koinos, akathatos. So any demon enters into a man, that's called an unclean spirit, akathatos, not koinos, but akathatos, unclean. Okay, now the Bible, I'm talking about down the New Testament, tells us about bad fish and unclean animals also. If you look at Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 and 48, again, that's what Yeshua is speaking. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net. It was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which when it was full, they drew to shore, sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. So there's good fish and bad fish. The fish thrown back into the sea because they are unfit for consumption. Now, to the Jews, it was abundantly clear what a bad fish involved. You can think of a catfish, yes, that's unclean. You can think of sharks, that's unclean. Why? They may have fins, but they don't have scales. A clean fish must have both fins and scales. Then, if the net brought in some prawns or shrimp, that is unclean, according to Leviticus 11. If a lobster got caught in the net, that is called unclean. It would be bad. They would throw it back into the ocean. Then let's turn to another passage, Luke chapter 11, verses 11 and 12. This is what we read. Yashua speaking. If a son shall ask bread of any of you that is a father, will he give him a stone? Or if you ask for a fish, will he for a fish give him a serpent? Or if you shall ask an egg, will he offer him a scorpion? Okay, so we know there would be no bad fish if all were made clean. Snakes and scorpions are eaten in many cultures, but Yeshua is obviously pointing to the uncleanness and these animals being dangerous. Okay, so the Pharisees would have understood him very, very well when he make reference to serpent and scorpion. Okay, if scorpions and serpents are now okay for us to eat, what's wrong with a father giving children to eat? Our heavenly Father, you ask him for bread, and he sends a serpent to us, the scorpion to us, right? If they were clean, at least we can kill and eat. Yes, in China they eat snakes, they eat scorpions as well. In Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, all these are commonly eaten. Okay, but Yeshua is saying the Heavenly Father will never give us such things. Okay, and maybe unknown to lots of Christians, unclean birds and animals are mentioned in the New Testament. Where? Revelation chapter 16, verse 13. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet. Frogs, unclean spirits like frogs. Okay? Frogs are unclean. Akathatos. Unclean spirits are unclean. Akathatos. Same category. All right? Turn to another verse. Birds and beasts mentioned in Revelation chapter 18 and verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Can you see that? Birds, unclean, unclean birds, habitation of devils. In the ISB version for Revelation 18:2, he cried out in a powerful voice, Fallen, Babylon the Great has fallen. She has become a home for demons. She's a prison for every unclean spirit, a prison for every unclean bird, and a prison for every unclean and hated beast. You can see how explicit the translation is in the ISV version. So, my friends, there's been no change about the list of clean and unclean foods in Leviticus 11. Never been any change. The New Testament did not change any of these things. Right. I will end this segment of the video now and resume shortly. And when we do, we shall be talking about another controversial passage, namely Romans chapter 14 and verse 14.